I mean, look, I'm no expert, but I'm just saying I don't think a spiritual awakening and a really bad acid trip are necessarily mutually exclusive, you know? Just the concepts themselves were just like repulsive. It was it was fantastic. Either raising others from the dead or rising from the dead yourself. It's the thing of horror movies or religion. Hello. Today I am reviewing the 2025 Best Novella nominees for the Splatterpunk Awards. This will be the final video in the series I've done, kind of catching up with the Splatterpunk Awards. In the future, I might try to go back and review some of the previous winners of some of the other categories, but for now, I am wrapping this series up with the 2025 Best Novella nominees, and I will let you know who was the winner at the end. We have 5 different nominees to go over, and honestly, we have quite a variety in terms of tone and intensity and the subgenres that they were playing around with. We have 5 stories to cover, so let's just get into it, okay? First up, let's do Master of Bodies by Robert Essig. First thing that I noticed about this story was the cover art. Out of all of the stories, I thought this one had the most compelling cover. I thought it was really beautiful art. The second thing I would like to note, what we discussed in the last video, which is the new alarm system we have going on. Let's get into the plot. Master of Bodies is about a guy named Kip. As a child, Kip was very close with his grandmother. And so when she passed away, obviously it's always difficult when you lose a family member, but he was very close with his grandmother, so it was particularly hard for him at the age of 9. So much so that on the day of her funeral, he just becomes overwhelmed with emotion and grief, difficulty with emotional regulation, and throws himself into her open casket to try to hug her again. And it is at that time that he has the realization that he has a special, dare I say unfortunate, arguably unfortunate ability. So poor Kip here at the age of 9 accidentally raises his grandmother from the dead. It doesn't go over well. Anybody else? Nobody else is on board with what has just occurred. And, you know, poor little Kip, he didn't know. So this first chapter where we are just setting up how Kip discovered this ability is wild. What happens after the rest of the people in the church at this funeral react to his grandmother not being dead anymore is just... It is a wild first chapter. And so basically the rest of the story is about him as a teenager having another opportunity to confirm his ability. And then we kind of jump forward to the main crux of the story, which is 10 years later. And at this point, we are following along with this new woman that he is starting to date, discovering what type of adult Kip turned into, somewhat through Shannon's and her daughter Sienna's experience. Poor Shannon, she meets Kip at work and they start dating. She just thinks he's a little peculiar, ignores some of her instincts. It kind of comes across partially as her not wanting to judge him if he's just a little bit eccentric, but it also kind of comes across as she has a daughter and she's single and she's willing to overlook some things because she really would like to have somebody in her life. There is a tinge of desperation to it. Something that I found really interesting about this story is Kip's emotional reaction to other people responding poorly to his ability. If somebody or something that is supposed to be dead is suddenly not dead, that would be scary. That would be unsettling. You would be afraid. So he has a sort of resentment. He has this incredible ability that makes him different from everybody else, and everybody hates him and fears him for it. And instead of praising him or being amazed or impressed or worshiping the ground he walks on. They fear him. It should make him special, but all it results in is shunning as opposed to adulation. That specific concept within this story, I think, is something that we can see in day-to-day life. Everybody wants to feel special, but half the time the people who are special are hated for being special. Whether it's jealousy or resentment or fear. As far as the splatterpunk elements are concerned, it has this body horror and gore that's effective, but just the concepts of what's happening at times, just what's happening is really uncomfortable. I had kind of a visceral response to some of the scenes. My only real criticism of this story is that I thought the concept of the ending was fine, but I did feel like the execution lacked a little bit of oomph. I don't know if it was just a little bit too expected. I wanted the ending to be something that made my stomach drop. But besides that, I liked the story a lot. I'm pretty sure I've seen Robert Essig's name quite a lot, but I haven't gotten around to reading him before. So this definitely makes me feel like this is an author that I would check out again. Okay, speaking of authors that I'm checking out again and have chucked out again. No, speaking of authors that I've read more than once. Next up, we have A Life of Crime by Aron Beauregard. Now this I thought was another very interesting concept from Aron Beauregard. A Life of Crime is exactly what it sounds like. We are following a guy named Harvey, and we are following his life and the escalation of his crimes over time. Harvey had an abusive upbringing. When he was young, he ended up going to a boys' home. He ends up running away from there. So at this age, of course, he's only 15 years old. He has all this trauma and baggage that he's carrying with him out into the world. He ends up befriending a girl named Danya. They are kind of living on the streets together. The first crime that he's really committing is theft. She'll go in and distract the cashier so he can steal food. It is done purely for the means of survival because they are too young to have real jobs, and they're on the streets and they need food. His life of crime starts off as a result of the abuse and trauma inflicted on him from others, and his desperate attempt to remove himself from those events, overcome those things, and survive on his own when he's too young to really know how to do that. The next natural escalation of things is heavy drug use. Having a desperate desire to escape reality. So this desire for drugs also lends itself to further theft and whatnot, trying to have money to be able to afford those things. Things just continue to evolve, one or the other. You see that crimes are being done less and less out of necessity and more out of desire. So our guy Harvey here finally commits a crime that he gets caught for, and he ends up doing some time in prison. So even after he gets out of prison, his life is not all sunshine and roses. Continues to engage in highly illegal and immoral activities. At one point in this story, there is somebody who seems to be extending Harvey a hand and saying, "Here, your life has been so hard. Let me help you." And Harvey makes the decision to trust this person. And he learns the lesson that if something seems too good to be true, then it probably is. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Obviously, we are getting into so many interesting subjects with the premise of this book. Manifest destiny, nature versus nurture. Taking someone like Harvey starts off his life, things that are outside of his control as a child, setting him up for failure. How there are people who are able to overcome similar circumstances. But is that enough to say that those things aren't responsible for his failures in life? At some point, you need to take accountability for your actions. Did he have the power to turn his life around at some point? He probably did. There were probably points in this story where he could have made different decisions that would have led him down a different path. But it's something where my understanding of this is that, whether it's abuse, trauma, even just extreme poverty, there's so many things that even as an adult, but especially as a child, that it changes your brain. It changes the way that you think about things, your ability to think logically, your ability to emotionally regulate. So sometimes I think it's a bit when people just say there are people every day who overcome their bad childhood and they turned out okay, they didn't turn into a piece of shit or whatever. It's sort of like saying, oh, you fell out of a tree and broke your leg, but Joe Schmuck over here fell out of a tree and he didn't break his leg. So obviously you did something wrong to not avoid breaking your leg because Joe Schmuck didn't break his leg, Yeah, the same thing happened to both of you, but it just affected the one slightly differently. Like one tiny little thing could have made the difference. To me, it seems that it would be the same. Like you're experiencing things in your life that can have a negative impact on your brain, the lens in which you see and interact with the world. And so just because falling out of the tree didn't break someone else's brain doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you because it broke yours a little bit. It might be harder for some people to make those good choices than it is for other people, even if they had similar circumstances. I think the sorts of subjects that we're getting into with this story are really interesting. The book has moments of humor in it that I really enjoyed. There were some really funny lines that aren't necessarily intended to be a joke per se, but it's just humorous. I really, really enjoyed this one. This one was my personal favorite of the group. Okay, next up we have Living Death Race, Beauty and the Brains by John Everson. This story, we have two main characters. We have this woman, Mira, who is the beauty of Beauty and the Brains, and she is introduced to us as this badass lady character who, in this kind of post-apocalyptic world where there's zombies and whatnot, she chooses as a hobby to get in a ring and beat them up. Like she's just engaging with them physically, like smacking them around because she's just that much of a badass, And so she is like that. And her father was a mechanic, so she grew up helping around his shop. And now that she's an adult, she still carries that knowledge with her. So when she finds this old Mustang abandoned, she's like, oh, hell yeah. And she takes it and she transforms it back into its former glory. And then our other main character, which is a dude named Tony, who technically is the brains of Beauty and the Brains, I guess, but I don't really see much evidence to support that, but that's presumably what goes on here. Now, Tony's whole thing is that he watches Mira in this weird zombie fighting thing, and he's like, oh my god, look at her. And then he finds out that she has this car. So he does some real messed up stuff to basically force her to participate in this living death race with him. I need a navigator, so you're going to agree to be my navigator as I'm driving your car, or you're gonna die, basically. And so she's like, you know what, okay. And so she goes along with it. And I have to be honest, at this point in the story, I was a little concerned. I was afraid that I wasn't gonna like this because I hated the way that this relationship between them started off. I really wanted her to kill him at the first opportunity. I really hated Tony's character, and I hated Mira's character for the way she responded to Tony. It's not the fact that she agreed to do the race because, again, she was gonna die if she didn't, but I just thought it was so strange with the way he went about this, that after this incident between them, that she just immediately seems to fall in line and like not just begrudgingly being his navigator of her car that he's basically stealing. But that she's like just playing, like truly trying to act as a good navigator and being his little passenger princess. And I thought that was so weird. I'm like, I thought this character was supposed to be a badass. This random man just appears out of nowhere and she just lets him get away with treating her this way. I don't understand her character. She behaves this way with Tony, who sucks, by the way. I'm like, okay, she doesn't really seem that badass then, does she? Right? Like, I don't know. Like, I was concerned. I was concerned, but this story really grew on me. So I was very relieved. I guess I should probably explain what the race is. So in this post-apocalyptic world where there are zombies as established, the major cities are walled off. Between these walled off cities, there's zombies wandering around. This car race involves people across the country in major cities. They start in their city, and the idea is that they are going to drive around the country with the goal of hitting the specific cities, circling around back to their home start point. Regardless of whether you're starting from Las Vegas or you're starting from New York, you're all supposed to hit the same cities. And so in theory, roughly the same length of race. However, because you have a navigator, you can adjust your route that you're going to take, right? And so the point of this race is that it's not just a matter of speed. You also get extra points for the zombies that you kill along the way. It's not just about the final destination, it's also about the zombies you kill along the way. So I'm not sure I completely understand why you need a navigator, because my whole thought with this too was that Mira, it's her car. She is perfectly capable of killing zombies. She is the navigator in the situation. Presumably she does know how to drive it. So what the does she need Tony for? As soon as her life was no longer in danger, she should have killed Tony. I don't understand what purpose Tony served. Like, he was the most unnecessary part of, like, he served no purpose. All he's doing is driving and being annoying. And she didn't need him to drive. Like, I don't really, like, Tony, we do not like Tony. Okay, like, anyway, them's the rules. There's a driver and there's a navigator. The navigator cannot drive unless the driver gets eliminated. That's another aspect of this race, is that you have all these different cars racing, right? If you do see a competitor out in the wild and they're not in their car, that's an important distinction. If they're not in their car, then you can kill them. Or do some other things. Like you can do stuff to them as long as they're not in the car. But if they're in their car, then it's against the rules to try to interfere with what they're doing. People need to stop and sleep, or sometimes just pee on the side of the road. People need to get gas. So there are reasons why people do need to step out of their car, and then you can, get out. That is an added element of complication to the race and drama within the story. So basically this story is about this race, but with Mira and Tony, the complications of their, when I say relationship, I don't mean romantic. This story is very plot driven. So in that regards, it's very fun to read because it's very fast paced. But something that I noticed about this book immediately, given Mira's beating up zombies, that's a form of entertainment, whatever, oftentimes with zombie stories, they're either kind of categorized as a monster, like a mummy or a vampire or something like that. But sometimes authors will lean into the fact that zombies were once people, and that this was a person who maybe had a family who cared about them, that they had a name, and that this book didn't really get into those sorts of things. You're casually fighting zombies in the ring for funsies. You're not viewing these as people who got sick and deserve a dignified death, that this is just a monster now and there's no humanizing of them. However, that does the tone of that starts to change throughout the story. The degradation and mistreatment of the zombies, while it is generally accepted as a normal part of society, as a normal part of this race, the characters within the story start to question it a little bit. There is a hint of shame, some acknowledgement that there is some humanity left within this vessel. At the beginning of certain chapters, there's these announcers who are announcing the race, and they're giving you an update on who's in the lead and what team got taken out, and these objective updates from the announcers that you wouldn't necessarily know if we were only seeing the story through Mira and Tony's eyes or their perspective. I thought that was a very nice touch to kind of give a bird's eye view of the events that are unfolding. Realizing that this is more plot driven and really not very character driven, it makes it feel a little bit more acceptable that Mira kind of comes across as more of a caricature of a woman rather than a realistic female character. But when you realize that none of the characters are really that deep, it becomes a little bit more acceptable in your mind as you're reading it, that she's written that way. And I appreciated that the questions that I found myself asking at the beginning of the story were answered by the end of the story. So that was a very satisfying feeling that those things were acknowledged. Was this the best thing that's ever happened to me? No. Did I like it okay? Yeah. Next up, we have Nipping Them in the Bud by Edward Lee. Now, this was the one story that I had read already. I read this story back when I did my Edward Lee author focus video. So I went back to kind of refresh my memory on the story. Nipping Them in the Bud is about a man named Sharsted. And he ends up going to a Chinese restaurant where he meets a man. Wimpy does have a real name, but Sharsted calls him Wimpy. There's an armed robbery at the restaurant, and Wimpy actually steps in. Turns out Wimpy ain't so wimpy, and he steps in and puts a stop to the robbery. But he doesn't stand around and accept his accolades for his act of bravery. He kind of like slips out, and nobody knows what he did besides Sharsted. We come to find out that Wimpy is not just a normal dude. He's got some special things going on with him. Wimpy has the connections and the power, allegedly, to set the rules in order for Sharsted to ever make it into heaven. And what Wimpy is like, you know what you gotta do? You need to actually eliminate a good chunk of evil from this world. The story is called Nipping Them in the Bud, right? So it becomes this really interesting thing, actually, of how far removed can you get from the crime or the mistreatment or the bad thing, the evil. So basically, he's telling Sharsted that you need to kill people on my direction if you want to make it to heaven someday. Killing evil people, or here's the thing, here's the kicker, and here's where it really gets interesting. People who are going to do evil things. It starts off with, this person has abused this animal. Don't you hate them? They should die. And then tell Sharsted to go kill the guy or whatever. And he does. But then it's like, well, this person hasn't done this yet, but they're gonna do this really messed up thing. Check this out. And he can kind of show him the future of what this person will do if they're not stopped. And so he's like, well, you should go kill him. And so he, does. Like that sort of thing. But then it's like, well, how far removed can we get? We're eliminating people before they've committed a crime because that we know that they're going to. This Wimpy knows, has the ability to know. But then it goes back even further. This woman is going to give birth to a baby that is going to do really evil things. And it just kind of continues to get further and further removed from the actual evil thing. And it's really interesting because it's kind of, where do you draw that line? The moral line where you can no longer justify your behavior to yourself. At what point would you follow your own feelings and instincts and thoughts as opposed to like a powerful being like this? A lot of interesting moral quandaries that you're getting into. Is there fate? Can you be born evil? inherently evil? Is your path already set before you, and that there's no way to take a different path or to change what your destiny is? It's kind of a catch-22, because you're basically saying that you're born evil. Okay, we can justify eliminating you as a baby because you will do this evil thing. It's your destiny. There is no situation in which you don't do this because it's your destiny to be evil. But then you're kind of getting into, well, how can I be blamed if it's outside of my control? Right? Like, I'm being punished for something that it's my destiny to do. I thought this was really interesting. I thought that the ending, it was dark in a very satisfying way. The whole thing has a very kind of dreamlike quality to it, where everything just feels slightly off. The entire story starts off with Sharstead having this nightmare. And so right off the bat, even after he wakes up, it never really feels like you're back in reality. The entire story has a very kind of surreal, slightly off feeling to it. Okay, and last up we have For the Better by Daniel J. Volpe. Now, okay, here's the thing. Funnily enough, just like with my last novella video where I couldn't include one of the novellas because it was the third in a series, this I thought I was going to be okay, because this story is a prequel to a larger novel called Left to You. Now, I was not concerned about this because I figured, well, it's a prequel, so I should be fine. I should be fine, I said to myself. And then I started listening to the audiobook of this. And the first thing that is said at the beginning of the story, let me play for you.
Stop. If you haven't read or listened to Left to You, don't listen any further and go grab that. This isn't a marketing ploy, but an actual warning. Okay. Did you read or listen to it? Good.
I literally stopped at that point and went and just got the audio book for Left to You, because I was like, okay, apparently I can't read this first. So I stopped and I listened to the other one, came back to this, and the first thing that he said was, okay, did you read it? Even though this is connected to that story, unlike Header 3 from my last novella video, I really think that I can talk about this without getting spoilers away for the bigger novel that it's connected to. So I'm still going to review it today. I am going to give you a basic knowledge of Left to You for context, but there's no spoilers and I'm not going to spend too much time on that. So the greater novel Left to You, which I'm sure I will be reviewing in the future in more detail, but the basic premise is that old man, Holocaust survivor, young man, sick mother, Joseph has some sort of supernatural knowledge that could possibly help Robert save his mom. As previously discussed, we're going to put up the alarm. Okay, so we know that Joseph survived Auschwitz when he was younger. That is something that is established. This kind of midquill to the other story is focusing on the time after Joseph survived Auschwitz and before he met Robert. Because as opposed to the regular novel Left to You, where you are focusing primarily on Robert and Joseph's interactions and then flashing back to Joseph's time in the camp, this story is focusing on that in-between time. So this is where we are being introduced to this supernatural element that has the potential to bring people back from the brink of death, how he comes to know about this supernatural thing and why it's something that he is extending to Robert. There is so much in this about severe trauma, about survivor's guilt, kind of discomfort as penance. We have such a strong desire as humans to see people as one-dimensional, as being just good or just bad. And so there are elements of this where you see characters that would be very easy to paint as just being one-dimensional villains, having a more wholesome side to them as well. Just because someone does evil things doesn't mean that they are incapable of doing good things. The good things simply do not erase the bad things, though. That's the thing. I think there is sort of that justification of vigilante justice. There's a lot of heavy topics in this. Obviously, there's the historical elements, the emotional turmoil of the life left behind by Joseph. It's very sad. It is the heaviest out of the group, but there is no shortage of gross bodily fluids and just vulgarity. I have one complaint about this, though. I want to be fair. I can understand why an author or an editor may feel this is necessary, but as a reader, I wish that there was a little bit more trust being placed in the reader to make connections without certain things being spelled out for us. Certain things that have the potential to be powerful and poignant become over-explained and repetitive. For example, one of the things that he talks about in the camp is that there's this stuff called Zyklon, which is the gas that they used to kill some of the Jewish people. And that this gas has a very nice almond smell. And so you have this discrepancy between this nice, pleasant smell that is associated with the slaughter of all of these people, mentioning that the Zyklon gas smells like almonds would have been adequate. And from that point, after it is explained to us, for the rest of the story, you could remark on the smell of almonds without spelling out that it reminds him of the smell of Zyklon gas. Like, we understand that. Feeling the need to remind us every single time he brings up an almond smell being like a triggering thing that makes him think of the gas, it's explained to us over and over and over again that it's upsetting to him because it reminds him of the Zyklon gas. And I just wish there was a little bit more trust being placed in the reader to remember why it's upsetting. That juxtaposition could be rather powerful, as you're making it lose poignancy by spelling it out too much. I feel like that's just one example. I feel like this is a little nitpicky, but I think it's something that would make this better. I mean it so constructively. I know that there might be some people who miss out on little details sometimes when you don't kind of hit them over the head with it, but I think that the people who get it are going to get so much more out of it that it's worth it if you lose a couple people along the way. You know what I mean? And again, I know that this seems like I'm being nitpicky, but these are just examples, right? This is a quote. "The joy in her fake smile didn't meet her eyes." The sentence in and of itself, whatever. You don't need the word fake in there. That's the sort of thing that makes me feel like you're spoon feeding me. If you just have the sentence, "The joy in her smile didn't meet her eyes," I can deduce from that it's not a genuine smile. Like, I know it's just people are describing things and whatever, but again, I feel like the sentence has more impact if you just let us as the reader make that tiny little connection without this and the novel together. I liked them a lot. There's so much to chew on. There's so much to enjoy about the story. And I guess that's just something that I really feel would have made it even better. You have the historical elements. You have all these sorts of emotional turmoil, but it doesn't lose the horror in it all. And I thought it was very well executed in that regard. Okay. So those are the 5 novellas that were nominated this year. And my personal favorite out of all of these, I would have to say, is A Life of Crime by Aron Beauregard. As far as who actually won, the winner of the 2025 Best Novella for the Splatterpunk Awards was Living Death Race, Beauty and the Brains by John Everson. As I said before, it grew on me as I read the story. To be honest though, I actually probably liked it the least out of this group, but you know, sometimes it's just personal preference, and I'm clearly in the minority on that. So that was the winner. My next video is going to be a little bit of a break from Splatterpunk because some of you guys are just horror people, you know, and you're not all. Even though most of you seem to be about the Splatterpunk, there are some of you that are just kind of horror people. But I think it is something that is controversial enough that a lot of you guys will still find it interesting. I'm hoping. I think I could probably make this a thing in the coming years to read all the nominees for Best Novel and Best Novella. So maybe I'll make a playlist or something for it. And that can include when I do that Header 3 video, which I don't know when, but I didn't forget. I will do that. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around. Bye. The ending itself, in her mind, what she is justifying as eccentricity. Ooh.